talking about heroes or villains, and I've picked the first character we talk about to kind of give you women someone to emulate. Now, there are things about this person you don't want to be like, and we'll get into those, and so stay away from those things. But there's some things you're going to be able to see that this person was very, very good in these areas. This person protected their family. This person did all they could to help God's people. Those are the kind of people and those are the kind of characteristics we need to emulate this morning. We're talking about heroes versus villains. And the end product here is we're going to find out some people that were always heroic. As we talk about these people, there's a handful of people in the Bible that nothing bad is said. Is that the kind of person you want to be? A person where nothing ever is negative is said about you. The Lord thinks this person has always been good. There's a few of those in the Bible, and we'll get into some of them. And then there's those that never even want to even get close to God. And then there's the ones in the middle that depends on the day, or depends on how you look at it. Next week we've got one that you can wrestle with a little bit and see which side you put it on, which side does this person go on. But we're talking about that kind of character, and I want us to learn the qualities of a hero or a villain. And maybe if we see that this villain is always this kind of person, yet I have some qualities like this, maybe I need to stop. Maybe I need to hunt the other way and get rid of these bad qualities and see if I can be more like the people I see in Hebrews 11. The people that God said over and over again, the people that are written about in the Old Testament and mentioned again in the New Testament. These people are righteous and holy people and sought after God. That's the kind of people we need to be. So we're talking about Rahab this morning. And if you don't know this great story, you're going to hear it. It's a great one of the Old Testament. We're going to see if we can bring out some of those stories we haven't heard about in a long time. But our overall passage is in Romans 15. Romans 15, and I want you to say these verses with me. You ready? Now we who are strong have an obligation to bear the weaknesses of those without strength, and not to please ourselves. Each one of us must please his neighbor for his good, to build him up. Again, those sound like heroic verses. Again, you could easily attribute those to Superman or Spider-Man. We need to, those of us who are strong, and you are a strong people, whether you know it or not, you've got the God of the universe behind you if you've claimed Him in your life. And at that point, you've got all the strength to do anything, and the focus and the ability to accomplish anything you choose in this life. So those of us who are strong have an obligation to help those without strength. That's what we need to do. And that's always the biggest picture of a hero, is that they're able to sacrifice themselves for someone else. We're going to see that this morning, that this person tends to do that kind of a thing. Well, we're talking about Mother's Day. I want to make sure I bring a little bit of history about Mother's Day for you. The modern American holiday of Mother's Day was first celebrated in 1908. So we've got a century-old holiday. And it was held when Anna Jarvis, she's the woman who really campaigned to make Mother's Day a special day in the American holiday system. She had a memorial for her mother in Grafton, West Virginia. Her mother had died 3 years earlier, and she loved her mother, and she wanted to continue to remember her mother, but she thought that there must be other mothers out there like her who are just as righteous and just as strong and just as upright, and we need to celebrate them too. She wanted a day to remember, as here are her words, the person who has done more for you than anyone in the world. Would your mother be that person? Now, sometimes, some of you, I'm sorry, you may not have that beautiful of an example. But I know many of us in this room would say our mother is the person who's done more for us than anyone else in the world. I know my mom sacrificed for me, just keeping me on the straight and narrow, keeping me focused, always pushing me, prompting me to do more, to work harder. That's the kind of person my mother was. Anna's mother, she was a peace activist. She helped soldiers on both sides of the Civil War. She didn't care about North or South. She said people are struggling. People are sacrificing their lives. They're losing limbs. They're coming back maimed, and I want to be able to help these people. Again, this mother began Mother's Day work clubs to address public health issues. Many of these guys were coming back unhealthy. The country wasn't near as healthy because of the war and the famine and the issues that were taking place. So she wanted to help that. As a mother, she did. She sounds like a very sacrificial woman, but a woman like many of you women in this room. Again, I understand how you women work. I love it that you're designed differently than we are. You have a bigger heart. You see things in a way us men can never see it. Again, you're usually much more in tune with the Lord than we guys are. And I'm not beating on guys. I am one of you, and I understand how we think for most of the time. But women are always thinking of the bigger picture. They're not narrowly, here's the goal and here's where we go. They're thinking on what's best for the family. It may mean we sacrifice this thing to ensure that our family's healthier. That's a great thing. This is the kind of women that many of you are. Again, several states, including West Virginia, adopted Mother's Day in 1910. Again, Anna worked very hard to make that happen. Woodrow Wilson signed a proclamation in 1914, making it a U.S. holiday. In 1912, Anna Jarvis trademarked the phrase second Sunday in May. Again, she's a tough lady. I like those. She's focused. She's going to ensure that people don't forget their mother. And so that's why we hold it on the second Sunday in May today. She also was very specific about the spelling of Mother's Day. You know, you wouldn't think it would mean that big of a deal. Now, if there are English teachers in here, you'll understand what the big difference is. But she wanted it to be singular possessive, not plural possessive or plural non-possessive. Now, look at the three different ways you can spell this. Apostrophe S, S apostrophe, or just an S without an apostrophe. And if you're an English person, you know those mean different things. Most of us have forgotten those skills. But she wanted us to remember our mother, my mother, not necessarily mothers universal, mothers across the world. It was important that we as children remember our mother that day. And she wanted the spelling to be correct. Again, it's interesting history. We want to honor mothers this morning. And again, if I don't say it enough, I want to thank you for being mothers. I want to thank you for what you do. The way that you sacrifice, the way that you love unconditionally, the way you continue to bring those children back, and the way you continue to work in your families and your grandkids' lives. That's a blessing. Don't stop that. We need your example. The women of the world set the standards for society. And at the minute we start losing those, all of society tends to just get watered down and we fall away. So continue to do that. But I'm going to pick a character this morning. And I want you to determine whether she's a hero or a villain. I think she ends up to be a hero. But we'll see how you come out on it. We're in the book of Joshua. Old Testament, a handful of books in toward the left side of your Bible. A great, great book of history. Great book of stories. There's so many good stories. It was written by Joshua, son of Nun. He was the leader of the children of Israel into the promised land. He was the one who was able to walk them in there. Moses couldn't. He did. Somewhere around 1400 BC, we're talking over 3,000 years ago, this story was written. This foretelling and the telling of the history of the people was written. The theme of Joshua is Israel's possession of the promised land and enjoyment of God's blessings through obedient faith. God will give you beautiful and great things in your life if you're obedient. Again, it's never a joke. I'm not trying to get money for the church. But the simplest form of obedience is to be able to give back to Him the things that He's given to you. That's the first form of obedience. And if we can't do that, we're going to have issues with other things. You're not giving me a raise because of this. We can do more work when you're obedient. But it's not even about that. It's about you doing what the Lord's called you to do. He's given you this. Because of that, God, you've been good. I'm going to give some back. Because you're good. That's a form of obedience. So we're in Joshua chapter 2, verse 1. We're right at the beginning of the book. So I want you to stand with me as you honor God's Word. I'm only going to read one verse. Chapter 2, verse 1, it says this. Joshua, son of Nun, secretly sent 2 men as spies from the acacia grove, saying, Go and scout the land, especially Jericho. So they left and they came to the house of a woman, a prostitute named Rahab, and they stayed there. Now, if I were to end the story there, that would not sound very good. So you're going to have to let me get into it very quickly because the spies didn't go to her house for it other than they were locked in there. But let me get you to that point. Let's pray. Dear Lord, you're mighty. And I thank you for this time, Lord. You're good. Let us learn the story, Lord. Let us understand what a hero looks like, Lord. And let us emulate that. We say this in your name. Amen. Yeah, if I were to just read that one verse, you would probably say, oh, that doesn't sound good. But it is much better than it looks. Excuse me, a little bit of backstory. The children of Israel had marched around the desert for 40 years at this point. And we know it's because of their disobedience. They just had to roam. Kind of get a little bit tired. And at that point, they're going to start listening to God in a better way. Moses is 120. He's not going to be able to take the people into the land. Now, we remember that. We remember that Moses simply sinned. He did something that God didn't ask him to do. They were trying. He was supposed to just deal with the rock, and he ended up striking it with his staff. It's not what God wanted. Moses had to pay the penalty for that. The same thing in our lives. If we make a mistake, God's very clear. Here's how I want you to work. And we do this thing. it still may be a beautiful thing, but we may not receive all the blessings we could have because we weren't obedient. Obedience is everything with reference to God. And it's a hard thing because we don't want to follow anyone. I understand. We want to be our own people, but God wants us to be obedient because if we're obedient, He can make us into what He wants us to be. He can do something much quicker than if He just has to slowly work us. Just think if we're soft, beautiful clay, what He can do, rather than a hard clay that's all dried out. It's got to take time to get it soft again. It just takes energy. It takes time. It's not quick. So Joshua at this point, because Moses can't walk him into the promised land, Joshua was the one chosen because he had faith years earlier. Remember that story? They were scouting out the land of Canaan, and there were giants there. Giants there. There's so many great stories in the Old Testament. And all the other spies says, oh, we can't do this. We can't go in there. And Joshua says, if God wants us to take that land, it doesn't matter how big these guys are. Again, we don't even need to be spying it out. Let's just go take it right now. Because of his obedience, because of his faith in God's ability, he was able to take the leadership when Moses couldn't. Remember Numbers 14:8. If the Lord is pleased with us, this is what Joshua said, He will bring us into the land flowing with milk and honey, and give it to us. This was a beautiful land, but there were some big men in there. There were some big ones, and they were afraid. Joshua wasn't. That's the kind of person that makes a great leader. They don't see the obstacles. They see the goal, and that's all we're going to. This is where we're going. I don't care what's in front of us. We're going to get there. A great leader doesn't see the obstacles. At this point in the story, they're 3 days from going into the land. They've been marching around for 40 years. And they're 3 days from marching into the land. And at this point, Joshua says this in 1:18, above all, be strong and courageous. But before they enter the land, they want to see what they're going to encounter. They want to see, okay, what are some of the obstacles before we get in there? We'll talk about that just in a second. So that kind of gets us up to where we are. Okay? So the first thing I want you to know this morning is that a hero takes many forms. He does. You look at some of the comic books, you look at some of the great heroes of our faith, you look at some of the heroes just of American history or history around the world. The people that stand out are not always the biggest, the strongest, and the most beautiful. They're the ones who believe in greater things. They're the ones that hope for something mightier. And therefore, they become a natural hero. And we can rally behind them because of their belief that this crazy thing can happen. So look at verse 1 again. Joshua, son of Nun, secretly sent 2 men as spies from the acacia grove, saying, go and scout the land, especially Jericho. So they left, and they came to the house of a woman, a prostitute named Rahab, and they stayed there. Joshua sends out spies. Okay, this is how the story begins. I really don't know what this says about their faith. Again, I'm almost a simple guy anymore. If God says do it, I don't need to think about it. I just go do it. But I'm not going to kind of fault him at this point. He kind of wants to know what they're going to expect. What is going to happen when we get there? What are the ways in and the ways out? Again, what's the wall look like? Are there any weaknesses in there? Do they have defenses we may not know about? Again, I think it's probably wise to have information before you start some kind of big fight. I'm not negating his faith at this point. I just, it's always a good question. Again, what is the population? If we're so many and we're getting ready to fight so many others, what's the odds of us doing well in this? Is this even worth the effort? Now, again, whether these are not his questions, I don't know. But as a leader, these are things I would be asking. We're about to take this land. Okay, what's it look like? What are we going to have happen here? At some point, when the spies enter the city walls, they get cornered. Okay, there's no way they can get out. These 2 men wind up at a woman's door. Okay, they have nowhere else to go. And if you've seen pictures, or if you're watching the show AD on Sunday night, after you've done Awanas and all that good stuff, but maybe you've DVD'd it and all these kind of things. It's a great show, but it kind of shows you what the cities would have looked like. They do a good job historically showing what things would have looked like, and they do a pretty good job telling the story. Again, understand with that specific show, they're connecting the dots. We're going through the book of Acts, but when the story ends, they're connecting it to the next story. So there are some things that we may not know, but they're doing their best with reference to history and tradition to fill in the gaps for us. So give them a little bit of leeway on that. But at this point, they wind up at a woman's door. And we must understand, this is the big thing about this, that nothing happens by coincidence. Do you believe that with me? Amen? Nothing is coincidence. Again, there's not enough odds in the universe to make some of these things happen. And there's really no chance with reference to God. God wanted His people to take the land. Do we believe that? He wanted His people, He'd been telling them for 40 years, you're going to take the land. It's their time. They've earned it. God says it's going to happen. It's going to happen. It's not a surprise with God. God isn't surprised that the king is after these men, because at some point these men get in there and the king of Jericho finds out that, oh my goodness, we've got some spies in here. I've heard about these people out here. We need to stop these spies and get them rounded up so we can find out what's going to happen. That's not a surprise. Again, you look at Hebrews 4:13. No creature is hidden from Him, talking about God. But all things are naked and exposed to the eyes of Him to whom we must give an account. God knows all things. God is never surprised. And again, if you think He is, you've got a small God. Because our God can see out. He understands the end. He knows what's going to look like. So that leads me to a few other questions. God knows all things. He knew these men would get into trouble. He did. He knows the end. So what's this all about? Is He surprised that these men are cornered? Or is there something bigger about to happen that we need to figure out? I think He's about to help some woman who needs help. I think God's about to bring in someone else. How many times in the New Testament, if you don't like Christianity, you have to love it that Jesus esteemed women as much as He did. In a world where women were nothing but third or fourth class citizens, even around the world right now, these other religions don't esteem women the way that Christianity does. God always lifted them up. He cared for them. He loved these ladies. And He brought them to a place that they hadn't been given by society. This is our God, and this is the way He loves humanity. So at this point, I think He's about to do something with the woman. A woman who's a Canaanite and a prostitute. He's about to do something special with her, because none of this is a surprise. That they would just accidentally wind up on this lady's doorstep. The only one who may be in the whole city that'll be kind to them? No. God knows something's about to happen. Now at this point, we should be looking for a villain. We should be. Again, we know that when it comes down to it, God is concerned with His people. And that's a great promise for each of you. God cares about you. And He will do anything He can to make sure that your work is accomplished. You look at the Old Testament, when it comes to those cities around the people of Israel, He really didn't care about them. He wanted them destroyed. He didn't want those people intermarrying with those people. He wanted His people strong and protected. So at this point, we see that she's a Canaanite woman. She's not of the children of Israel. God's going to do anything for His people. Because God's about to remove the Canaanites, she's a Canaanite. She should just be collateral damage. But we're going to see a quality into God of His love for people and the way that He sees greatness in people, and He can use people to do mighty things. God has a plan for her life. Is she willing to follow it? That's the question this morning. Is she going to be willing to follow what God has, because He can do something great in her life? We're going to hear the end of the story in just a few minutes, and it's so much fun. The way God takes care of those who take care of His people. It's a beautiful thing. God can use anyone He chooses, from the best of the best to the worst of the worst. And you know what? To God, I don't know if He would say there's a best of the best or a worst of the worst. There are those that follow Him and those that don't. Simple enough. You and I are going to say the best is going to be the highest educated, the wealthy, the well-raised, and this prostitute here would be the worst. God's going to use whomever He chooses to do His work. And at this point, it's a crazy person you would never expect. Again, never expect. Heroes aren't always who you expect. They're just not. They end up rising for the occasion. You remember a lady called Rosa Parks? How many remember her? Small little black woman who did not want to sit at the back of the bus. She'd had it. Now again, I don't have a reference for a world like that. I just don't. I wasn't raised in it. I wasn't raised in the Deep South. So I don't understand why people would be in one place or another. People are people to me. You earn your position in life with reference to me. Now that may not be biblical. But if you want to act like trash, okay, you can be trash. I don't care who you are. If you're acting like a good person, you're a good person to me. I don't think in terms of color or race. It's just not an issue. But we remember this. She sat quietly in the front of a bus, leading to an equal rights movement for all African Americans in this country. Everything was changed because of that bus and that ride. Everything. A small little lady changed all of the fabric of society. You think she woke up that morning saying, I'm going to change some stuff. This is going to be great. I'm going to be a hero. I'm going to get me a cape. I'm going to sit at that bus, and here's what's going to happen. Do you think that's what happened? No. She had just had it. And that's what I love about women. I do. They will not put up for injustice. They will. Remember Anna Jarvis at the beginning. But how many other stories can we tell about women when men will just acquiesce to whatever's around? Now, men are good fighters, but we're not going to necessarily take the puritanical approach. We're just going to say, this is the wrong thing. We're going to deal with it and move on. Women, it's always the bigger picture. This is wrong. And this is wrong for this. And this affects society. And this affects our children. And our children are being raised to think like this. And we can't have this. It's not that this is the problem. It's that it affects so many other things. That's what I love about the way women think. It's not simple. It's so deep. And I have to wrestle with my wife sometimes because she's always thinking of the bigger issue. I'm thinking, we're talking about this tiny little thing. No, James, it's in Los Lunas and it's Albuquerque and it's New Mexico and the world. The universe is involved in this. Okay, I love you, sweetie. I do. I don't get it. God hates sin, and prostitution is one of them. Remember that. God's about to use a prostitute for His own good. He's about to bless the children of Israel through a prostitute. Proverbs 23 is very clear. For a prostitute is a deep pit, and a stranger is a narrow well. Indeed, she sets an ambush like a robber and increases those among men who are unfaithful. These are not good words said by those who might do these kind of things. Prostitution in the first century, those prostitutes were to be stoned. There was no good way out of this. We remember an issue with Jesus saying, if you are without sin, cast the first stone, dealing with a prostitute. We see what God thinks about this, but God's always got redemption at His heart. A Jewish person didn't speak with a Canaanite person. We got problems here. We've got barriers already. And Jewish men didn't speak with women. And yet we've got a woman, a Canaanite, and a prostitute that the children of Israel are going to have to work with, and she will be the one to save them. She will be the one to ensure that they can get in. And because of her faithfulness, they'll protect her. Again, we've got lots of problems with reference to this woman. Yet God's going to use her to protect His own people. He doesn't use a Jew. He doesn't use a man. He doesn't use a religious leader, but a female Canaanite prostitute to save His people. But this is par for the course for God. When does God do what you expect? In your own lives? How many times has He told you something's going to happen and you're ready for it to go this way and it comes in from that way? Boom. Looking over here and I'm having to figure out what this thing was. But you remember, who was Jesus? He was a poor carpenter's son. And yet He saved the world. He didn't come in like everyone expected. He came in this beautiful baby with a family now that's got a reputation because she was a virgin. All these crazy things that He was raised with. Yet God did mighty and miraculous things. So we see a hero can take many forms. He or she can. Heroine, if you want to use that word. A hero is unconventional. They are. We find out that the king of Jericho, and again, it's hard to preach 2 chapters. It is. So I'm kind of bringing you up to date and connecting all the dots as we can. The king of Jericho had reports that the men had stopped at Rahab's door. Again, they start wrangling, people seeing these guys who don't look like them. Where'd they go? They eventually find out that the only place it led to this was to her door. So what they do is at this point they come and question her. What happened? Where are these guys? We're going to take you. What'd you do with them? And she comes up with a story about sneaking the men out before the gates were closed. That's what she ends up saying. Now, I'm not condoning lying. I'm not. But here's what really happened. Go on to verse 6. It says, but she had taken them up on the roof and hidden them among the stalks of flax that she had arranged on the roof. This is exactly what happens. Again, she had taken them on the roof. She'd hidden them. Whether or not I would have thought of that, probably not. I stuck them under the bed. Hey, there's a bed. Go stick it under there. They'll never find you under there. That's a good stop. There's a closet. Go in there. They'll never look in there. Okay? Guarantee they'd be found out the first thing. But a woman always tends to think out of the box. They don't think in fragmented thoughts like us. Man, we're pretty straightforward. Here's where we're going. They're always just different ways, and I love it. Whether or not I would have thought of that, it worked. It was fairly unconventional. But that's what is great about women. And I love having women in leadership roles because they don't think inside the box. They always have new views and new ideas on things that we guys wouldn't come up with. And guys, I'm not beating you up. But us to understand we are blessed to have them around. I'm blessed that I'm partnered with a woman who doesn't think anything like me. It just sure makes things interesting a lot of the time. But I'll tell you, we sure get things done, because I guarantee I wouldn't have guessed, oh, yeah, that's a good idea. Let's do this. I'll take credit for it and everybody's happy. Okay? But this is what we see here. Again, not all of the history of leaders in the past have thought inside the box. Another great example would be Joan of Arc. Again, you see these great women of the past. Women you would never expect. They say she was a tiny little person. Just small. But what she did is, at this point, she felt she was called by God to see King Charles VII crowned in France. Now remember, at this point, if you know your history, England occupied France because of the 100 Years' War. But it was the culturally place where French kings were crowned. She wanted that to happen. At this point, France is fighting with England. So she crops her hair, something you wouldn't have done in that century. She dresses in men's clothing. There's plenty of reports that she would put on armor. Again, these kind of things. She went to the front line and she fought in the Battle of Orleans. Again, a woman didn't fight at that point. A woman stayed home. And she said, this is what I think has to happen, and I'm going to do everything I can to make this thing happen. If God tells me to do it, I will do it. That's what I love about women. When God gets a hold of them, there's no getting them off track. They are very, very special because they will stay focused. They'll stay focused on that big, beautiful picture of what they're supposed to do. They won't forget it. And this is what we see happening. Again, she helped to lead the battle to victory through her determination and focus. Eventually, the church killed her. Okay? The church is pretty good at killing its own people. How many stories have you heard about that? I guarantee some of you have been hurt by the church in this room. I know you have. I heard a story this week about another church that hurt someone because of a mistake they'd made. Shouldn't the church be a place of redemption? Shouldn't be the church a place where everybody can come and be restored and be given hope and be loved when the world kicks me out? And yet this is what the church does over and over again. The church killed her for heresy and a lot of other things they made up at the time. Again, it happens way too much. I don't want that to ever happen here. I don't. Come in with kindness. Come in with joy. Love people unconditionally. We don't need to tolerate sin. And again, if someone's going through something in their lives, we need to lift you up and say, I'm going to hold you strong. This is not the best thing for you in your life, and I want more. I don't even live in your life, and I want more for you than you're having for yourself. I'm going to lift you up, and I'm going to hold you strong, and I'm going to walk with you during this difficult time. That's what we need to do, not say because you don't look like us or act like us or think like us, you're gone. We've got centuries of that, millenniums of that going on. It needs to stop. The church has got to rise up to what it needs to be. But we need to remember that Joan of Arc was unconventional. Rahab's quick thinking kept the spies alive. Back on track. She stuck them in some hay. I would have never thought about that because I would have thinking they're going to be sneezing in there. They're never going to make it. They're probably allergic to that stuff. The spies were so well taken care of, they fell asleep. She's just taking care of them really well. Guys, go in there, lay down. I'll bring you some Cokes later. It'll be a good time. Relax. Hospitality here, I don't know. I'm making this up. But we know that they were so taken care of, they fell asleep. When you're in God's will, there's no reason to worry. These spies knew that they were going to take the land. And they knew that God was going to take care of them. And they knew that this person, even though they weren't supposed to talk to her or be anywhere around her, they knew that this person is the one who's going to take care of me. So we just rest. You need to remember that. If you're in God's will, relax and rest in it. Now, if you're not, you need to do some running. Okay? Get after it because it's going to be tough. But if you are in God's will, no matter what's around you, that fire will not get to you. Make it a little warm. But it'll probably be a nice toasty warm. Get out your marshmallows. Enjoy that a little bit. She comes up and she reminds them that at this point she knows that God's given her city over to them. Okay, we get a little bit of a history lesson. She tells them of the things she already knows. Everyone knew what had happened to the children of Israel over the last 40 years. Everyone in that whole region would have heard the stories. They knew that God took care of them. They would have understood the story about the Red Sea, and she relates that to them. This is the defeats at Sihon and Og and the destruction of their kings. She heard the stories, and she knew that their God was the one you didn't want to wrestle with. And if their God was about to give their city over, then there was no way they were going to make it out of that city. She knew this. She's a smart lady. Very smart lady. Sadly enough, at the lowest level of society. but probably the most intelligent person there. The king of Jericho should have said, "Hey guys, come on in. We'll give you some houses. Can we at least leave without you killing us? Anything to keep us alive." But she understood the bigger picture. She begs for help. "Guys, I've helped you. Please help me. Please help me. Please help my family." She knows her city is going to fall. She wants protection. She wants her children to come out. She wants her family, her parents to make it through. So she begs for help from these marauders who are about to come into the city, because she knows they're going to lose. There's no way. The men tell her they protect her. They'll take care of her. They'll do these things when they invade if she gets them out. Okay? You take care of us, we'll take care of you. Simple enough. So at this point, she lets them out. She's evidently got one of those beautiful views right on the wall. Her window's in the wall. So she lets them right over the edge of the wall with a long rope, and they get out. But before they leave, they say, "There's 3 things we want you to know. 3 requirements. We will save you if you do these 3 things. You need to put a scarlet cord over your window." Okay? This window, we can see it from a long way out because you got your house right here on the wall. This window needs to have a scarlet cord over it. Kind of reminds you of the Passover time, doesn't it? A little bit of kind of an illusion, remembrance of that. But there's this window, if that window has that cord over it, will protect you. We will not destroy you, like we remember in the concept of the Passover and the blood over the door. If you have that, we'll take care of you. Second thing, anyone in this house, you can fill this house up with anybody, but the minute they exit those doors, they're dead. We'll take care of anybody you want to bring in because they're attached to you. Because we respect you and because we're going to honor you through this. Fill this house up. But if they leave outside and head out that door, they're dead. Second thing, you can't report what we're planning. At this point, she probably spent a little bit of time with them. She knew what they were going to do, when they were going to be coming. You can't report that to anyone. She agrees, but at this point, all she has is their word. How many women have you known that just have faith? They know that when it's said, "Okay, I trust." Women, they trust so well. Men, we just sit there and fight it. You got to prove it to us 48 times before we trust you. And women have this implicit trust. Okay. So we see the first thing, a hero takes many forms. A hero is unconventional. Third thing, a hero doesn't always know the outcome. How many great Marvel movies or DC comics have you read, or anything about a hero where they're getting into this fight, they don't know how it's going to end. They're just going to go do their best. And maybe if we work hard enough and we fight hard enough, it's going to work out for us. Going over to verse 21 here. "Let it be as you say," she replied, and she sent them away. After they had gone, she tied the scarlet cord to the window. What did she do immediately? Guys, you and I, we've probably gone out and weeded the garden first. But the minute that they leave, the minute they're out of that house, the minute they are gone, she's tying as much red cord over that window as she can, because she's going to follow the rules. Here's what it said. Here's what I've got to do. Again, women are so good about that. They are. Rahab has no idea what's going to happen, but she puts that cord out immediately. Are the men going to keep their word or not? This is a whole other country she doesn't know anything about other than the history and the stories she's heard through the cities that have gone before them. All she knows is generally that they have a God and they're about to come in. And their God seems to do great things for them. Are they going to follow their word? Are they going to keep to it? I don't know. Are these men good men? Are they even going to remember her when they leave? I don't know. Will her family be spared? Or will these men forget her? Or will their leadership? These men get back and leadership says, "No, we're going to destroy everyone inside that building. Everyone inside that entire walled city. They're all gone." I mean, that's how God worked. He would destroy everyone. Did God give the caveat for this woman? She doesn't know that. She's got faith. Something many of you ladies have. There's a lot of trust here. Trust is one of the qualities you see in a great hero. They will trust, even if they don't know the outcome. I can't trust this person. I'm going to anyway. Whether I know if they will or not, I'm going to trust them. They have hope even when they can't see it. Hebrews 11:1. Now faith is the reality of what's hoped for, the proof of what is not seen. Did we not talk about that last week? That's where we were. Hebrews 11 started this whole series. Rahab has faith with no guarantee of a future, but she has hope. She has hope. Another person, another great hero of the past that we can look to, who is a woman, is a small little young girl called Anne Frank. She's a perfect example of hope amidst a time when there was no hope. Anne was a Jew hiding during World War II in Germany. Through her many months of hiding, she learned forgiveness. She always had hope. Even though these people wanted to destroy her, she thought of the best of them. She thought that there was always better out there. There are still good people. They just, sadly enough, are misguided. She didn't know her outcome, and sadly enough, she and her sister were eventually discovered, and they were sent to Bergen-Belsen concentration camp, where they died of disease. Yet today we can understand true forgiveness through her writings. She wrote just in her journals, always thinking the best of people, the beauty of the surroundings. Writing, locked in this little tiny place, just talking about how beautiful everything was. What a sweet spirit. There's very few boys would have written that. But girls have that outlook. There's always hope. There's beauty out there. We've got to get back to the beauty. So what happens to Rahab? Is her faith or trust rewarded? Let's go on over. We have to go to chapter 6 to finish this up. 22 to verses 25. Now listen to this. Joshua said to the two men who scouted the land, and this is Joshua, the leader. The men have gotten back and they've talked to him. He says this, go to the prostitute's house and bring the woman out of there, and all who are with her just as you promised her. So the bright young men who had scouted went in and brought out Rahab and her father, mothers, brothers, and all who belonged to her. They brought out her whole family and settled them outside the camp of Israel. They burned up the city and everything in it, but they put the silver and gold and the articles of bronze and iron into the treasury of the Lord's house. However, Joshua spared Rahab the prostitute, her father's household, and all who belonged to her, because she hid the men Joshua sent to spy on Jericho, and she lives outside of Israel to this day. This is what happened. These are men of honor. They came back and they followed through. She put her life on the line. The king could have killed her at any point. But how many times do we see women standing right in the middle of the fire? They're just not going to back down because they know what is right. They're not going to come back and regroup and later and we'll kind of back up and we'll come back later. No, they're going to stand in front of that tank and get ready to fight because this is the only way that's right. I will not back down. That is what's so beautiful about women, is they stay strong. Continue to do that. Keep that beautiful focus that you have. Joshua fulfills the promise of the spies by ensuring Rahab's family is protected. He didn't have to. He said, I'm sorry you made this promise, but this has nothing to do with what we're doing today. But Joshua is an honorable man. And if she's going to protect his men, he's going to protect her. What a beautiful story. No matter Rahab's past, she redeems herself in one big fell swoop at this point. Again, no matter what her family thought about her. I imagine she probably wasn't thought of well by her family, being a prostitute. But she redeems herself. All of her family is protected. God uses Rahab to save her family. God's people burned the city down to the ground, but everyone attached to Rahab was protected. Rahab was a hero for God. And God rewarded her. What a beautiful story. She recognized God's power without really knowing Him. She stood strong amidst the pressure. No matter what the king's men did to her, she didn't give up the spies. She thought outside the box. She helped men she didn't know, and she had faith and hope. Because of all of this and more, Rahab is a heroine for God. We spoke last week of Hebrews 11. Remember that? And I hope you read through it. And if you did, you already know where I'm about to go. But Rahab's mentioned there, even though she isn't one of the children of Israel. And even though at this point it's been several thousand years, God didn't forget her in the writing of the book of Hebrews. Hebrews 11:31. By faith, listen to this. Rahab the prostitute, sadly enough, that's her adjective for the rest of the history. Rahab the prostitute received the spies in peace and didn't perish with those who disobeyed. She was strong. She knew what was right, and she did it. That's what I love about women. They will not back down. They won't. They'll take pain even when the world would have gotten away, because this is what is right. And I must stand up, and this is the time to do it. Again, this woman in a time when women weren't respected. She was a person who was a Canaanite when God was focused on the children of Israel. She was a prostitute, the lowest of low in Canaanite society, let alone Jewish society. Yet Rahab has over a chapter written on her in the Old Testament and is mentioned as a testament of faith in the New. There are many things we can learn from her. Again, probably her greatest virtues are faith and trust and hope. How do you compare today? Now, ladies, I've been kind of working on you, but guys, we can be in here too. How is our faith? Do you understand the greatness of God and that He will do what He chooses to do? How is your trust in Him that He will bring it to completion? She understood a God she didn't even know. And she was afraid of what He was about to do. So she wanted to get on His side because she knew that was right. She had hope when there was no place for hope. How are you in comparison? Would you be considered a hero or a heroine for God? You need to learn from Rahab and you need to grow. Now, there's some things you don't need to learn from Rahab. Okay? Stay away from some of the things that Rahab may have done. But understand when it comes down to it, faith and trust and hope are beautiful things. Do you have that this morning?